Hello, I'm Dr. Nidhi Gupta, pediatric endocrinologist and digital wellness coach in Nashville, Tennessee. This is Inspinar. My guest today, Mohana Rajakumar, is a novelist, scholar, and screenwriter. She tells women-centric stories in unusual settings. Her short film, Me Against the World, was named an official selection at 8 international film festivals and winner in its category at 5. Mohana, welcome to Inspinar.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Mona. You started out as an English professor and have now become a screenwriter, director, and producer. How did your life evolve?
Well, I think one thing we kind of fail young people in the education system is we kind of train them in an outdated mode to like work for a single company or in a single occupation. And I think it sort of started to change in my generation, but now I hope that we can tell people to follow their curiosity. Because I heard a lot of like follow your passion, but I think that's a kind of a heavy burden and it's very vague, right? Because you change your passions all the time. But for me, I always loved reading. And I think that's kind of the through line through all of these experiences is storytelling that I've always loved. Stories, and through stories, people, cultures, languages, all of those things.
Not necessarily follow your passion because your passion changes, but follow your curiosity. How did following your curiosity lead you to be a filmmaker, Mohana?
Well, I came to filmmaking, actually it was a pandemic silver lining. I had been a novelist for a very long time. And then where I was in Qatar when the lockdown happened, and it was a very strict lockdown there. It was 5 months. The only things that were open was the hospital, the grocery store, and the pharmacy. So I was literally, kind of stuck at home with my family and, young children. And I just thought, I need another creative outlet. What can I do with what I already know how to do? And that, of course, was storytelling.
So you went from screenwriting to becoming a director and producer. Was that a scary leap for you? You mentioned earlier it's always good to keep horizons open, think outside the box and maybe pursue careers other than what you were originally stereotyped to pursue. Is it a scary leap to take to go from what is traditionally a safe path to a path of uncertainties, what the outcomes will be?
Yes and no. I mean, I think you have to kind of figure out what makes you tick. And for me, novelty is definitely crucial. So I need new and exciting experiences. Probably as a creative person, I find that stimulating and inspiring and invigorating. So I think the fear part comes a little bit later. And I think we'll talk about this, with my current project where sometimes, things don't go exactly the way that you think they're going to, or as fast as you think they're going to, or, all those kinds of things. I think that's when the fear comes in. But I have this kind of saying that I'm known for because, everyone's like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. You're so fearless. I'm like, no, I feel all of the fear. I have all of the fears that you do. I just do it anyway. So that's kind of my slogan in this era, as people say now, in this part of my era. I'm saying feel the fear and do it anyway.
You feel the fear, but you do it anyway. Beautiful. Where do you draw your characters from, Mohana? In most of your movies and in most of your novels, the work that I have read, you have a lot of female-centric movies and novels. Where do you draw your characters from? Are they inspired by your own life or the life of people around you?
Yeah, I think there are composites for sure. Often my stories start with like a tidbit that someone tells me, and I think, oh, that's interesting. What would it be like? For example, one of my short stories is called Colored with the British spelling, Colored, and it's about a British Indian man who goes to a bar in Texas and tries to order a drink during the Jim Crow era, and is totally confused why everyone is upset that he's there. Because of course they mistakenly think he's Black. He's from the UK, where this isn't even, a thing, as they say. And that started from a story somebody told me of something like that happening. And then of course, you take it from real life and then you take it in a different direction for fiction.
Hmm. There are several fascinating hats that you wear, Mona. How do you balance it all? And when we were discussing recording the podcast, I asked you for what would your memoir, if you ever wrote a memoir, be called? And you said, how to have it all, but not all at once. So, how can one have it all, but not all at once?
Yeah, I think it's about knowing that there's seasons, and different seasons come with different uh perspectives, objectives, foci, sort of thing. I mean, for me, it's a very simple kind of scheduling principle, is that I don't do anything every day. So, I don't exercise every day. I exercise 3 times a week. Even spending time, like intense quality time with the kids, I don't do that every day. I have yesterday, for example, I was with them for like 6 hours. I took them on an outing. Some friends were visiting. Today, I've hardly seen them at all, other than getting them off to school, welcoming them home. So I think that definitely helps. I think the balance comes from for me, from having kind of a schedule where you know what you want to do, and then prioritizing the time and the days um, to do it. Because I've definitely had conversations with friends before where they're like, I'm supposed to cook, I'm supposed to clean, I'm supposed to moisturize and work out and see my friends and, help the world. And like, when am I supposed to do all this stuff? And I just always tell people, like, yes, you can do all those stuff. You cannot do all those things probably in the same day. And it's that pressure of trying to do everything that's important to you in the same day that I think can throw off the balance or make it really challenging.
How often do you write? And when you are in that writing space, Mona, what kind of space is that for you? How do you deal with the distractions that surround us every day? How do you shut those distractions out and just let your creativity flow?
Well, I mean, you've put all the major writing questions right there in that one sort of question. I think the main thing is to be 100% clear about why you want to tell this story. And if you want to tell the story that you're telling because, it's to capture your grandmother's life, or it's to have an impact on people, or to forward a cause, or, though all of those are different, equally valid reasons to write. But if, for example, you're hoping you're going to be the next J.K. Rowling, or, you want fame, you want fortune, those are, I think, a bit fuzzier and also daunting. So I think the clearer the goal is, the more passionate and the more driven you can be towards finishing that project. And often I think people are confused about why they're writing, or they're not clear, or there might be more than one reason. And so then when it comes to folding the laundry or unloading the dishwasher, a task that has like a beginning, a middle, and an end, it's much easier to push off creative tasks to something that has a tangible, deadline. And I think that's kind of where people get stuck. Whereas for me, whenever I start a writing project, I know that it's because I want people to feel what it's like to live in the Middle East, the real Middle East, not the one that you see only on the nightly news, or it's because I'm exploring now in film what it's like to be a young college student these days. That's the feature that I'm working on. So it's that experience, that story that I want readers and viewers to feel. And I know that if I don't tell it, no one else is going to tell this story. And that kind of pushes me forward. And being a working mother, having time constraints is actually really great because I don't have the luxury of procrastination, right? So if I have 2 hours set aside, and usually it's never longer than 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. There might be a day where somehow I get lucky and there's a 3-hour block. I know that if I need to write, 2,000 words in these 3 hours and they don't get written, that's just going to make it harder for the next day. So it's very easy to sit down and just say, okay, this is the time you have to do it. Let's just do it. And then that way we keep it simple,
I agree with you when you say it's easy for human brains to procrastinate creative tasks, because creative tasks often do not have, they have a beginning, but maybe it's hard to visualize that there is a middle and an end. And when it's hard for us to visualize that process, it's easier for us to procrastinate. You are the creative director of Short Film Lab, which is an incubator for teen female filmmakers. How did that come about? And what has your experience been in working with teens, and how motivated are they in terms of writing and pursuing creative tasks without distractions?
So this generation is really interesting. I think they're in some ways much more creatively ambitious than maybe I was at that age, or, you and I were, because a lot of what they've experienced their whole lives is about content creation, right? So they've been consuming content, or they've been content themselves. If they have a parent who is an influencer or a writer, or so many different things are possible now with family stories and family narratives. So I think innately they're a little bit different than we were. Innately, we're all humans are natural storytellers, right? We've been telling stories since we were like scratching on caves or sitting around the campfire. But I think this generation is sort of geared towards thinking about an outward audience only because they are constantly that audience member. So when you think about YouTube, for example, that, hey, like, subscribe, and share sort of tag that comes along with YouTube, my 4-year-old was saying that. When he was making, he had a YouTube channel when he was like playing with toys and different things like that. But later when he was 6 or 7. And so just naturally, organically, he would end his videos with saying, be sure to subscribe, hit the subscribe button. And not because I told him that, but because rhetorically he understood, I've watched these videos, I know what these videos are. So from that point of view, they're way ahead. They also digitally, in terms of understanding equipment. Now, they might not have ever used a real camera, but they know about framing, they know about lighting, they know about maybe jump cuts. They sort of already think in a cinematic way that maybe you or I didn't do, right? That kind of storytelling was for television or for movies or for someone else, whereas it seems much more internalized for them. Now, in completing films, they're just like anyone else, and especially, I guess, like young people with lots of competition for their time, in that we admit 15 people and we probably get there is attrition, that we might get 10 films, or we admit 10 people and then we might get 5 films. So this is our third group that we're doing, and let's see. I'm hoping. I always hope every time everyone's going to make a film, but as we know, that's not up to me.
It is fascinating when you say that the young generation has been consuming content, creating content, and they have probably been the content themselves. It's just fascinating. I never thought about it like that. Tell us about your next series, A Diwali Dilemma. When it will be ready, where can we watch it?
Well, you've been a great supporter of Diwali Dilemma as one of the female-owned businesses that backed us. So thank you for that. It was wonderful to have so many people come out and support. So A Diwali Dilemma is a retelling of A Christmas Carol. So that classic Charles Dickens story where Scrooge, a miserly, mean, toxic boss, gets visited on Christmas Eve by three ghosts from his past who warn him that he's about to throw his whole life away, that he, in fact, has spent most of his life being miserly and mean, and he has one last chance to change that, or he will die alone, and everyone will be happy celebrating at his funeral. There's many versions of A Christmas Carol, but that's really the original, the dark one. And Dickens wrote it in his time in the Victorian era as a way to encourage wealthy people to give back. So that was the main message for his time was, listen, people, when they couldn't pay their debts, they'd end up in the poorhouse. They'd have to pay their debts off. The poorhouse was a wildly difficult place to live. People would get sick and they'd die. So being poor was very, very, very difficult. It had its own flavor back then. Being poor is always hard, but back then especially. And so that's really kind of what the trajectory of A Christmas Carol is. And so what I wanted to do is retell it for a more modern focus and with a different culture. So we have a female lead, Mala, she's Indian American. And instead of the focus on Scrooge, the boss, because one of the things that always surprised me about Christmas Carol, it is a story of redemption for Scrooge. Even though he doesn't deserve it, he gets his chance. But there's Bob Cratchit, his employee, who's long suffering, the father of Tiny Tim. If you remember things about Christmas Carol, you remember the ghosts and you remember Tiny Tim, the little boy on the crutches. So Bob Cratchit is his dad, and he's just there, and he's Scrooge's faithful servant. Even though Scrooge is mean to him, he doesn't pay him on Christmas, he makes him work. He basically, in some versions of the story, is implicated in Tiny Tim's death, because if he had been more generous to Bob and the family, Tiny Tim might have lived. So I thought, this is an interesting character. Like, what's wrong with Bob? Why would Bob hang around and work for Scrooge? In the original version, it works out for Scrooge. He gets redemption, he changes his ways, and he becomes a great guy. But I thought, what if Bob Cratchit just quit? What if Bob Cratchit quit and went on and lived his best life? So basically what I've asked in a Diwali Dilemma is, what if Bob Cratchit was a woman, a 30-something Indian woman named Mala, who was chasing all of these things that other people had suggested to her might satisfy her. So she's an investment banker, she's working long hours, she's ignored a really potentially viable love interest because he doesn't fit kind of the mold of what she thinks she should be doing. And what if three spirits come and visit her on the first night of Diwali, and they're all former mentors, female mentors? What would they say to her? And would she listen? And that's basically the story.
I can't wait to watch A Diwali Dilemma. When do you think the post-production might be ready, and where can we watch it?
Well, I would love for it to be ready for the first day of Diwali, which is November 12th, 2023. We are in the final stages. As you mentioned, we filmed in Nashville this summer, which is when we got a chance to connect, which was amazing. And we are still crowdfunding, in the process of trying to raise or find connections to get to post-production. So and people can go to my website and read more about the project there.
Could you tell us more about your website, Mohana, so that our listeners can visit? And if they are feeling inspired and motivated, they would love to contribute to the post-production of your movie.
Yeah, sure. So it's Moha Doha, because I've lived in Doha, Qatar for a long time. So just go www.mohadoha.com and click under the short film tab. And I'm also Moha_Doha on Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your fascinating story with us, Mohana. We learned a lot about how to have it all, but not every day, not all at once. Thank you for being on Inspinar.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your message as well, to remind people to put down their devices sometimes and go out into the world and really experience it. I think it's really tempting to just be online all the time because there's always something you can do, right?
There is always something you can do. Maybe put your devices down and write a beautiful story without distractions. Let's reconnect with the real world. Let's reconnect with health, joy, and efficiency. Let's reclaim our time and attention. Let's ungrip devices and grip life. I will see you all next time.